Nuts and Bolts is a book about hope, with real stories of individuals and companies making a difference in the tech space. I speak to the author, McLean Sibanda.
My journey of going around and talking about innovation and intellectual property, people were amazed at the stories that I was telling them of entrepreneurs, but also at some of the things that were done at the Innovation Hub. And it dawned on me that we do not tell enough of our own stories as Africans, particularly stories of innovation and startups and entrepreneurship. And therefore, I started writing to make sure that we can get the word out, but also some of the things that we've done here can be scaled up in other situations. And so that's how Nuts and Bolts was born, so that one can be able to tighten where there's things in place, take off the nuts from the bolts, and make innovation work for Africa.
Who needs to take a page out of your book?
So the book is written for a number of readers. It's written for the entrepreneur. There are stories here of other entrepreneurs, and therefore there's relatability. There's also lessons in terms of how these innovation hubs and incubators actually operate. And therefore it makes it much easier for the entrepreneur to be prepared as they go out into the market. Secondly, the book is written for innovation ecosystem builders and policymakers, so that they understand what is required to establish an innovation hub, to establish an accelerator, an incubator. But also, more importantly, what is required to support entrepreneurs, because we have to go beyond just the policies. You have to provide the funding, you have to provide mechanisms for those innovations to be scaled up. And I think lastly, the book is written for leaders. I start off in the book talking about this transition that I had to make. I made a transition myself, but I inherited an organization, in essence, that needed to pivot. And in transforming an organization, leaders face challenges. And I talk about some of those challenges in the book, and also some of the lessons, because it's quite important as you lead that you understand the people that you're leading, but also to avoid some of the mistakes that are made. And in the book, I talk about some of those mistakes where, in essence, I was more focused on results, and at times I forgot about the people, that there are people that have to implement these, and these are mothers, fathers, someone's sons, and so forth.
Now, I'm glad you touched on the issue of support. So my question to you is the public sector geared towards retaining intellectual property and taking that intellectual property and pushing it forward for the entrepreneur?
So what we've seen in South Africa since 1994 are changes in respect of how we work with intellectual property. 1996, the R&D strategy introduced mechanisms, in essence, that led to a strategy in 2006, and then a law that I was privileged to be part of drafting in 2008. And that is the Intellectual Property Rights from Publicly Financed Research and Development Act. So in as far as publicly financed research and innovation is concerned, I believe that there's great strides that have been made, particularly in terms of supporting the identification, protection, and commercialization. So universities today and research institutions are in a better place in that particular regard. Where, however, we have failed is how we then take those innovations and put them into the marketplace in South Africa for government to use, whether it be in the healthcare sector or whether it be in solving water and sanitation challenges. There is a challenge there. And the problem really is around procurement. We've seen many innovations that struggle to make it into the marketplace in South Africa, but find a marketplace elsewhere. And therefore, I believe that we need to relook and rethink our procurement, the Public Finance Management Act. How do we perhaps develop an approach where government can have preferential procurement for innovations that government is invested in? You look all over the world, even the COVID vaccines, there's been a hand in terms of how government has actually funded the development of those vaccines, the R&D that led to the IP.
Now, should government fund or should government stay away from funding?
Government has got a role to fund, particularly the risky stages of development. So the R&D, where there is basic curiosity research, government has got a role. But also in a place where the technology has not been proven or is looking for markets before the venture capitalists can come on board, there's a role for government to fund there. But once the market failure has been addressed, government should stay away, and private sector needs to take that through to the market.